Learning and actually sticking to solid practice methods and strategies is one of the best things that you can do if you want to play the music that you love on piano more easily and quicker, and just make the most overall progress with your playing. We have to practice smart, and there's lots of ways we can do that, but here I'm going to give you 2 fundamental principles that you should always keep in mind. When people don't, they can often get stuck. Then at the end, I've got some quick fire helpful bonus tips too, so don't miss those. When we're practicing, not playing, practicing, we must always have very specific goals or targets we're trying to achieve. We have to stay mindful and clear about exactly what we're trying to do when we're working on a piece, or usually just a section of it or one of our exercises. And as a beginner, when you're starting something new, it's often useful to just focus on one thing at a time. For some basic goals we often want to keep in mind, let's say you're learning a new piece of music. Now most people are usually conscious of hitting the right notes, but you also usually want to be repeating the exact same fingers each time. So that might be the main thing to focus on until you get it solid. And the point is that if you don't specifically keep that goal in mind as you're practicing something, then you can very easily start using different finger numbers each time. And you often need to use the same fingers so you can build a habit and learn to play it easily. Sometimes we'll learn each hand separately first, and then of course we need to get them working together. So the next goal would be to become really clear about exactly when and which notes in this hand meet the notes in this hand. We might not be playing it perfectly yet, but essentially before we can do that, we have to have that clear idea of exactly what we're meant to play, all the basic mechanics of how the notes fit together. So at this point, it's usually going to be really slow and something else might go wrong, like the technique isn't perfect. The rhythm's probably off and there's some pausing and hesitating because you're concentrating on just getting the right notes and the right fingers in the right order to match up. And that's fine because you're concentrating on the main goal that you need to first, and then you can think about the other stuff next. If the section that you're working on is this long, but it's not all going correct and it's difficult to achieve your goal throughout the whole thing, then you find target points. You've got to build it up. So try and get your goal up to this point, and then this point, and then this point, until eventually you can do it all. You've got to be aware of when it's not working just because you're trying to do too much. And you want to try and find points that sort of make sense, like maybe a chord change or a little phrase of the melody. And don't be afraid to make those increments as small as you need, and if you really have to, you can go note by note. When all those basics, the fingers and everything, are falling into place more comfortably, now is the time to then focus on other things, like perhaps getting the rhythm accurate and playing without stopping or hesitating. Again, you have to focus on it because people sometimes pause and hesitate without realizing. And if it's not working for the whole section, just build it up in manageable chunks. It might feel like you're moving slower, but in the long run, you're moving quicker. Of course, you're going to have specific technical goals to keep in mind as well. Maybe it's your hand placement so you can reach things easier and move around more fluidly. Or maybe you're trying to work on nice relaxed gestures as you lift up and move between positions. Let's say you basically had the rhythm correct, and now you're trying to add in this nice relaxed movement as well. If you're achieving your goal of getting that nice movement, then it doesn't matter if you maybe pause and hesitate whilst you do it for the first few tries. You don't have to get everything all perfect together to start with. You can get this right, and then you can get that right, and then eventually you can learn to get things right together. Another good example of needing to know what you're working on is when you're practicing scales. So it may be that one day you're focusing on 1 or 2 scales and you're trying to learn to play them perfectly. You're working on your technique, maybe trying to play them faster. On a different practice session, your focus is on just memorizing loads of different scales and being able to jump in between them and recognize them comfortably. In that case, you're not going to push your technique. You're just going to try and play lots of different scales and play them at a comfortable tempo and maybe even just 1 octave. And the same with technical exercises like Hanon, for example. If you're doing those, for each exercise, you need to know what element of your technique you're trying to focus on. Otherwise, you might not be getting very much out of learning them. There's lots of aims that you might have when you're working on something. It might be perfecting the dynamics or the articulation, that kind of thing. Just always be deliberate about what you're doing, because practicing haphazardly or just trying to do too many things at the same time just really doesn't work. And stay focused on them too, because it's really easy to just go off on tangents. The next really important thing to do is to fix problems. And this means first actually listening out for and identifying the problems. It means not glossing over them and hoping they'll just fix themselves. And it also, importantly, means taking a minute to think why you're having the problem, what's causing it, and how are you going to fix it. You have to isolate the problem and then go back to the first thing and make the solution the goal. So you should always be looking out for problems, and you need to go through this process a lot in your practice time. And it may feel like you're taking a step backwards and going slower, but I promise you, in the long run, you're going a lot further, a lot quicker. We all make lots of mistakes. Sometimes it's harder to notice them, so I recommend sometimes filming yourself or recording yourself to pick up on some things that you might not catch. Sometimes it's things that we're just doing generally throughout our playing, so it may be like bad sitting position, or maybe your wrists are down here. But if the problem is happening in one particular moment, which is often the case, usually that problem needs to be fixed by isolating that little moment. Don't keep going back to the start and doing everything building up to it. You'll waste time doing that to start with, so you want to take that little section out. Sometimes it makes sense to do a little bit of a lead up. When it's starting to go well, then I like to practice it with a bit of a bigger lead up. So you take it apart, fix it, when it's solid, then put it back together. So there's that one annoying bit that keeps going wrong, and there's often some common reasons as to why. So here is some questions that you should ask yourself to try and identify why it's going wrong so you can fix the problem. Is it going wrong because you just can't remember what happens next? The next note, the next couple of notes, the next chord? Or is it that you know it but you just can't think of it quick enough? Is it that you can't read this bit well enough as you're playing it? Is it that you know really well what to play, but you keep getting the fingers wrong, so you just get stuck? Is it that you just can't keep up with it, or you can't make the next note or chord quick enough? Are you playing it too fast? Is the rhythm or the pattern sounding off? And if so, is that because you're unsure of what it's meant to sound like? Maybe you do know what it's meant to sound like, but something with your technique is holding you back from actually being able to perform it accurately. Then you think more about the technique, look for a technical solution. Is it your hand position? Maybe you can find a better hand position to reach all the notes comfortably, or maybe it's the way that you're moving. If you're sight reading and you keep making mistakes, then you also have to take a moment and think why. Is it that you just can't read it quick enough? Do you need to practice reading your individual notes? Do you need to practice reading intervals? Do you need to work on your rhythm reading? Maybe you're getting mixed up with the key signature. Or maybe you can read the notes fine, but then you're having trouble finding those notes quick enough on the piano. Zone in on exactly what's causing the problem. Then fixing that problem your goal is really one of the best things that you can do for your overall progress. Here's a few quick extra bonus tips then to help you practice smart. Remember to share your favourite tips down below in the comments. I really want to emphasize the practicing in manageable chunks, just getting to this point, then this point. Or for example, if you're learning a scale and it's going wrong, going up and down, just go up and then learn to come down before you go up and down. Go as slow as you need. Go slow enough that you can actually implement your goals. Going too fast can usually be a waste of time because we need that thinking time to actually process what we're doing. Be organized. Think about what order things make sense for that bit of music to do things in, but also with your time and your goals. Some people like to keep a practice diary. It's useful to write down exactly what you're trying to achieve. Some people like to set an allotted time. I like to set a certain amount of tries that I get it right. But remember to know when it's time to take a break and come and have a go another time. Learning piano or practicing isn't a one-size-fits-all. You have to find some tactics that suit you. I always say this, but be consistent. Come back and practice little and often. This is super important because you reinforce the information, you remind yourself of what you're learning, or it just starts to fade away and then it gets harder to do again. I think going slow and being consistent are two main things to watch out for there. If you want some other ways that you can learn songs faster and learn to memorize music more effectively, make more progress, then you should watch this video next. Thanks for watching.